Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 78 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 17, the Fantasy Championship for most of you, and if you play next week, the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick is not happy with his NFL Sunday. I had an okay NFL Sunday. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm excited to get into some of these games.
Yeah, let's just get into it.
Let's get into it. Nick really wants to get into it.
I'm so fed up with my organization.
Nick is not happy with his organization at all.
At least my organization usually plays at 1, so I'll have like 8 games roughly to get through before I have to talk about my organization. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
well, I mean, we all saw the Jets game, so I mean, I'll just be honest, like they didn't look good. I'm not saying my Seahawks look great, but the Jets did not look good. They didn't lose the game off of bullshit calls, didn't lose the game off of, a last second thing, but, they just didn't look good. They need a quarterback. That's the reality of it. But I text Nick Managro, I'm like, hey, when we're recording this game, he goes, nope, not looking forward to it. And I'm like, I get it. Like I've been in that situation before, but it would.
Well, I haven't seen a playoff potential for my team in 6 years, and I haven't seen us make the playoffs in 11. So
see, the issue is they roped you in.
You've seen a Super Bowl more recently than
right.
I've seen a playoff appearance.
You're right. You see, the thing is, they gave you hope, and that's kind of what my Seahawks did for me, and that's why I was real pissed after the Carolina game a couple weeks ago. Listen, Seattle wins that Carolina game. I think they're a better team than Carolina. They win that Carolina game, and I think they're in the playoffs right now. If they had won that Carolina game, or maybe they would. Maybe they still probably would have to beat the Rams next week. But anyway, they're gonna have some trouble next week. So because Aaron Rodgers ain't gonna lose at home. Anyway, gonna be a lot of fun to talk about. I have a lot of games to talk about. I know most of your fantasy seasons ended, so if you're still listening, thank you for that. We're gonna kind of go game by game, give you our biggest takeaway, and our biggest takeaway could be maybe about this game, but also a little bit about the season. I mean, we'll have content in the off season talking about maybe our rankings, stuff that we kind of did before the preseason, how that kind of affected things, where, a very early look at outlook to next year. So that'll be off season stuff, but we will give little opinions throughout this show at least. And there are some people that do play week 18. So we're gonna start getting ready for week 18 and your fantasy championships. And I wish you the best of luck right now, because you know what? It's gonna be a lot of players sitting. Sounds miserable to me. I won't play in a league with week 18s, but if you are, we'll try our best to help you, because that is our job. So first off, thank you guys to all of you that tuned into our week 17 live show, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Got questions throughout the entirety of that hour. Hopefully we helped you guys win your fantasy championships. If we gave you a take that lost you the championship, I do apologize for that. Hopefully you don't hold it against us, because this stuff is ever changing and it is tough to predict. If you want to keep watching our live shows, we'll have one more for this fantasy football season. It's going to be this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It might be a shorter one, because again, I don't know how many people are going to be playing in week 18, but we'll still answer your questions from about 8:30 to 9:30, whatever that's going to be. That's on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to keep listening to these episodes in the offseason, hopefully you do. We can start preparing you for the 2023 fantasy football season. All the episodes are available on all audio streaming platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show like you have done for the live streams, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure you hit a subscription on that channel to over 130 subscribers. We appreciate that and all the support you guys have given us on YouTube this season. Make sure you drop a like on any video that you're watching. If you're watching this video, make sure you drop a like on that as well. Keep connecting with us on social media: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, PrimeTimeFFPod, and then PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. I do promise in the offseason we are going to fire up the TikTok. Nick is going to teach me TikTok. I now feel old, or I'm saying I need to learn a social media. But in the offseason, that was a miss by us this season, but it's okay. Anyway, let's get to it. Weekend wrap. I've had a lot of fun with these Monday shows. We went like over an hour last week, just talking football, talking fantasy, and I have a lot of fun with it. So let's get into it. Arizona Cardinals versus the Atlanta Falcons.
I think we got broken up a little bit there, but I assume you're asking my biggest takeaway from the Cardinals.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from the Falcons and the Cardinals. I hope it didn't get broken up. If it did get broken up, I do apologize for those of you listening. I am still in New York. It's a little bit of a spotty Wi-Fi over here, but we're talking the weekend wrap for week 17. Cardinals, Falcons, your biggest fantasy takeaway from that one?
So my big takeaway really is that everyone from this game is kind of like meh. And when I say meh, I mean, it's really hard. And I'll preface this for the entire episode to say, here's my big takeaway from week 17 from your entire fantasy season to go into week 18, where most of these players are playing or not playing. The fractional ones, the ones like we kind of care about, are playing for their jobs or losing their jobs or playing to be a free agent. So when I say everyone's meh, I mean all the stars were out of this game. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Zach Ertz, the big three, all three injured at some point this season and out in this game. And I didn't see anything spectacular that made me want to draft anybody from this game for next year.
Sure.
I think Drake London has promise, but I didn't see, in what I thought was a more favorable matchup for him. I didn't see, I didn't see a young stud, but then again, they're going to have an entirely new team. They might have a new coach next year. They'll definitely have a new quarterback next year. So it's like it's hard to say a takeaway other than I didn't see any stars. I didn't see any stars in this game.
Sure. My big takeaways is a guy. Maybe it's a later round guy. Tyler Algier. Last 6 weeks has over 50 rushing yards in each of those games. First 3 of those, he's only going about 10 attempts, 11 attempts, and last 3 after the bye, 17, 18, 20 attempts for 139, 74, 8.2. Average over 4 yards per carry, a touchdown in 2 of those 3 games, over 15 fantasy points in all 3 of those games. If you started Tyler Algier throughout the playoffs, I'm not saying you won a championship because he didn't put up super duper numbers, but I mean, you got 15 points in your flex spot each week in just standard league. So you probably, he might have helped you win a championship. And that's pretty sweet. I think this is a guy that, we got to see what they add to the running back depth, but they clearly favored him over Cordell Patterson. So again, questions we'll answer next year, but this could be a late round guy that you may look to target because they put more faith in him later into the season. He'll play next week against Tampa Bay. We'll see what he does there. But again, this might be a guy that you could look to next season in the late rounds. He's not going to be, top 3-4 rounds, but running back dead zone, he could be a guy you draft. Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions. Man, Lions are a juggernaut, but they're running into a buzzsaw next week. But the Lions, they look really good. What was your big takeaway from this one?
So I already said I didn't see any stars in the other game. Here's where I got to say the exact opposite. You saw a lot of stars in this game. You saw Justin Fields, who, as I've said for multiple weeks, you do not need to be a good quarterback in the NFL to put up good fantasy numbers. And Justin Fields, he didn't hit his projection, but he had the highest projection in all of fantasy football this week. Did put together a solid fantasy day. 132 yards on the ground, nearly got into the end zone on that big, massive rush. And in the air, he was horrendous against what has been a terrible secondary all year. But he has no support on that outside. He does not have a lot of help. But my big thing is, like, we always talk about the year 3 quarterback breakout. For the last 2-3 years, it's really taken off. I mean, between Tyreek Hill going to Tua and A.J. Brown going to Jalen Hurts and Stephon Diggs going to Josh Allen and even DeAndre Hopkins a little bit earlier going to Kyler Murray, you saw these big step-ups from some of these better quarterbacks who they'd had the running game to their in their arsenal. And they once they got that star out there, a lot of stars started aligning. So I think there's going to be a lot of stud receivers that are on the move this year. DJ Moore pops immediately to mind. Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson. I'm sure there'll be.
If I'm any commander, I want out of there. I can't wait to talk about that game. Oh man, don't even get me started.
So it feels next year. It has to. I mean, most of this is going to have to do with next season. Like the big takeaway is Fields is probably going to go right around where Kyler Murray went this year, like the quarterback 4 through 6. And if he gets one of those star receivers, he's going to put up Jalen Hurts this season.
And Fields had just about his 5th worst game of the season at 16 fantasy points. So not a good game for Fields, but he probably didn't lose you your fantasy championship. I mean, I don't know how many quarterbacks scored more than him on the week. I'm just curious. You know what? I'm going to look right now. So we're in week 17.
It was a high-scoring week overall.
This is, So, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So he finished 14th. But let me name some of these guys over Justin Fields. First off, Jarrett Stidham at 3. You are not starting Jarrett Stidham, so don't even complain about that. Daniel Jones at 2. I don't think you're going to start him over Justin Fields. Mahomes is there, obviously. Russell Wilson, I guess, padded his stats. I didn't see a lot of that. 23. Sam Darnold, surprisingly, had like 4 touchdowns at 21. And a lot of these guys are studs that should be scoring more points than Justin Fields for where they were drafted. Herbert, Holmes, Brady. So I don't think he had a bad game yet. He had an average quarterback game, so he probably didn't lose you your week. There's probably no player you're going to pick up that you're going to drop. Jared Goff, though, Goff had a really good week. I don't know what the Lions are going to do at quarterback. I think if the Lions win next week, they could end up keeping
They're in the
Goff.
playoffs if they win next week.
Right. If they win next week and he takes it to the playoffs, then they could consider keeping Goff. I don't know what they're going to do with Goff because I think he's good enough, but he's not great. So I don't know what interesting situation with Goff. From a fantasy standpoint, I mean, 22 fantasy points, quarterback, 6 on the week. Jared Goff had a really good day. 255, 3 touchdowns. I mean, again, he's looked really good through the back half of the season. Only game that he didn't look great in was against that Jets defense that's been, really solid.
Jared, before you go to the running
Yeah.
game, I want to talk Goff a little bit.
Jump in.
He's in the tier of quarterback with the Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins. And I think that's a big compliment to him because I think everybody wrote him off as, like he's a backup. He can't elevate you. He can't take you to that next level. And I don't want to say like, cause he's not right. Like he's not a playmaker like Mahomes. He'll never be on that level. Yeah. But you plugged him in for Stafford, and a whole year later, he entirely turned the franchise around. Stafford was not finding wins, and I know we could talk about Stafford didn't have a good team around him. I mean, Detroit Lions were the worst defense in the football for the first half of the season. It wasn't even close.
They're still bad in the second half too. It's not like they made major improvements.
They missed Amon-Ra for 4 games this year. They didn't get Jameson Williams, their top pick, up until the back half of the year, the back quarter.
Swift for a couple weeks.
So Swift was out. Jamal Williams wasn't really there. Kenny Golladay looked good with Goff. TJ Hawkinson they traded halfway through the year. Like Jared Goff's done a phenomenal job keeping this organization afloat. I think he absolutely is going to be this quarterback for the following season and will have years on this organization because as Nick talked about earlier, like there's not a lot of quarterbacks that get drafted and become studs, like all the guys near the top. And the Lions have proven this year with Jared Goff to be too good to be in that area.
I think the Lions are in a good position to draft the quarterback in rounds 3 to 5 or something like that. At some point next year, I think they probably should. I mean, Goff, he's in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 now. This year, 4,200 yards, 29 TD, 7 interceptions, passer rating of 100.1. We'll see what he does next week, but hats off to Jared Goff. Also hats off to the running backs, both of them. If you drafted Jamal Williams and if you had the balls to play him, 144, 1 touchdown. I think he's 1 touchdown away from breaking Barry Sanders' single season record for the Lions, which is ridiculous. Here's DeAndre Swift. If you rolled with him this week, the injury clearly nagged him, a couple injuries, and his snap share went up. His carries went up over the last 2 weeks. I've been saying that. He went 78 rushing yards and a touchdown, then 4 receptions, 39, and a touchdown. Both those running backs had really good games for you and probably helped you win a championship unless you were facing like Mike Evans. And we'll talk about him in a couple games. So next up, the Denver Broncos versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I wrote originally all Denver players disappointed, and Nick edited my note to except let's ride. And I didn't even look at Russell Wilson because I didn't even think he played that well. I know he had a rushing touchdown or 2, but I didn't even realize he played that well, and he's a quarterback 5 on the week.
Let's ride.
Russell Wilson in 2 games against Kansas City averaged over 22 fantasy points. So yeah, there you go. I mean, good for him, I guess. I mean, not a bad way to end the season. Yeah. Let's ride, baby. Let's ride to like a top 3 pick for the Seahawks.
Yep.
You could take any of these notes unless you have another one.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little off here because we already talked about I think these 2 teams in particular, they're going to be the most interesting to evaluate next year because the wide receiver room for Kansas City, it's not a mess, but it's a fantasy mess. Like you don't know who's going to be the guy each week. Mahomes told us before the season. It proved right. I don't think anyone outside of Juju I think Juju and Hardman finished as a wide receiver 1 3 or more times. No other receiver did that. But they don't. None of them dominate like a Justin Jefferson. And then you look at Denver, and it's like, well, now it's a whole new regime that's going to come in there and coach. And are people going to draft Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton in that 6th round again? Judy's stock probably went up. Sutton's probably down, but we have no clue what's going to happen next year. I think both these teams are going to be very, very interesting.
I think every Denver player next year is going to be underdrafted to the extent that people are going to be afraid to draft Denver players. I think they're going to avoid them like the plague. And I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. That's a take that I'll come to next year. But I would bet that people are avoiding Denver players like the plague, and it's either going to win you or lose you fantasy games next year. Because if Denver ends up being the same team that they were this year, then you made a good call avoiding them. But if they get a new coach and they break out a little bit, then you're going to win some games. Travis Kelce, 7 and 43 yards. 11 fantasy points, not bad for a tight end, but this is, the guy that probably scored the most fantasy points on your team the entire season. 2 of Kelce's worst games now were against Denver. It's something to kind of remember next year. There's no way I'm going to remember this in 8 months, but 2 games against Denver, 11 points in each of those. He had 10 against the Chargers week 2, and he had 7 against Cincinnati. So 2 of his 4 worst games are in the last 4 weeks, and both against Denver. So something to note there. And lastly, Jerick McKinnon. He might be the fantasy MVP for the playoffs at least.
100%.
I think you got to argue. Maybe the best waiver pickup maybe of the year. last 5 weeks, 30. There's in standard scoring for ESPN. Last 5 weeks, 14, 32, 34, 12, 22. In the playoffs, that means he's averaging over 15 fantasy points. McKinnon, 52 and 2 all in the air. He's the only running back in NFL history with a receiving touchdown in 5 consecutive games. So, again, hats off to him. That's great. It's great for him. So, good for you guys that went and picked him up. I think Nick was on him more than I was. So good for you guys. I'm sure they'll keep him next year. They should. We'll see. Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. This game went exactly how I kind of thought it would, except I thought the Patriots would actually win by 4 and cover the spread. I don't know if you want to start, but this game was not a fantasy friendly one. There were a good amount of fantasy players that could have really boomed if Tua didn't have his 20th concussion of the season.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 2 because I say it's 3, you say it's 2, but
no, it's 2. They didn't let the first one heal, so it just.
Well, I think he got a 3rd concussion on this, or 2nd concussion, and re-aggravated.
I think he was already concussed though. It's like if you break an arm, it's already broken. I think he was already concussed.
It's like you broke the arm in a different spot. Whatever.
Okay. So he broke his brain twice, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So it's another game where I'm like, these guys are so interesting to evaluate. I think the big question, and it's more so to do with football, is where are these 2 organizations going, and how does it go for your fantasy team? The Miami offense looked absolutely horrendous, but this is the second time Bridgewater came in and got hurt, and they had to replace him at quarterback. It's so hard to gauge that, whatever. But then you see the Dolphins, the first half of the year was phenomenal. Jalen Waddle, the second half of the year. Jalen Waddle, who was the wide receiver 4 at one point of the season, kind of fell off a little bit. I think he still is going to finish in the top 10 or just outside of it, but a guy that really fell off on the back half of the year. The New England Patriots, no offensive plan, no offensive coordinator. I think Bill O'Brien's going to come back there, and he's a phenomenal offensive coordinator. It's going to be so hard to draft Jacoby Myers and address his ADP next year because he had a very consistent stretch, and then he winded up being very inconsistent down the stretch. Ramondre Stevenson put up 2 of his worst games of the year, or his 2 worst games of the year since week 3 in the first round and championship round of your fantasy playoffs. So I don't know, man. It's a lot of I think there's a lot of question marks for some of these teams that felt like surefire, you knew exactly what they were.
I want to come to Waddle's defense a tiny bit. After the bye, so looking at 6 games, 13, 1 against San Francisco. They got obliterated. 5 against the Chargers. The entire offense looked bad. Then we're in fantasy playoffs now. 20 against Buffalo in the snow game, 25 against Green Bay, and 8 today. I want to wipe today off because I said all week that he was a bust. I wanted no part of him knowing that Tua was going to be out. I should have had him on the all bust team. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because of there's a chance Tua would play. But I mean, I told everybody to bench Jalen Waddle. I don't know if people listen to me, but I told everybody bench Jalen Waddle. And Tyreek Hill didn't have a good game. I think Tyreek Hill only had 14 fantasy points, and it's really tough for these really talented receivers to just adapt to a new quarterback most of the time. I mean, Teddy B obviously got the injury, tough New England defense. Then the third stringer comes in. I forget his name. It was
Skylar Thompson.
Yeah. So really, really tough. So I do want to defend Waddle a tiny bit. I don't think his back half was as bad as we kind of thought it was, because even in his first half, I mean, he had back-to-back games under 10 fantasy points, and that happens for receivers sometimes, but in the fantasy playoffs, like if Waddle had 2 this week, I think he boasts you another 15 fantasy points.
So that's where I'm going to have the struggle with it, because, for example, Saquon Barkley, a lot of people faded him this year because of the injury history. Jalen Waddle doesn't have too much injury history to my knowledge, unless if he did in college. But you're gonna have to account his quarterback's injury history, because this is, I think, the 4th or 5th injury that he's had in his 3-year career so far. So if you're gonna see him playing with a backup quarterback for a third of the season or even a fourth of the season, it's gonna affect his ADP to some extent. And the Dolphins' offense is nowhere near as explosive as it was in the first half of the year. So my whole argument of why I don't trust wide receiver 2s on teams, it's sort of these low floor games, like Jalen Waddle has proven. He has 4 games under double digits since in the last 6 weeks.
No, that's fair. All right, the Colts against the New York Giants. The Colts are bad. They're just ugh. Listen. We all should be rooting for the Jags next week. I'm just saying that. And we'll talk about the Jags in a few minutes, but we all should be rooting for the Jags, because you know what? The Jags are fucking fun, man. The Jags are fun. Doug Peterson's got these guys going. Again, I'm going to save this now. But anyway, I'm wrapping it back because the NFC South sucks. They're no fun. I had Taylor in 4 leagues last year. He won me a lot of money. I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to have a fantasy season like I did last year. I'm never going to win 2 leagues, points in another, a spread pool, a fantasy place. It's never, ever, ever going to happen. I got so lucky. I mean, my teams are good, but you still need luck. And I want to really nail that down at the end of the season, that I don't care how good your team is for the first 14 weeks. You really, really, really need luck if you want to win money in those last 3 weeks, because anything can happen in a head-to-head matchup. Even if you have the points title, I have 2 people in my dynasty league that they're going to be 10, they're separated by 10 points. You need luck. So with that said, as much as I was happy that Jonathan Taylor was on my team, I couldn't stand watching the Colts last year. I wanted to rip my hair. I hate the NFC South. I loathe all those teams right now except for the Jaguars. They get a pass. The rest of them, send them to the SEC at this point. Let them play college football. I want no part of these teams. Michael Pittman, though, 641-1. Get the fuck out of town, man. Request a trade. Send him to the Bears. Send him to the Bears or something. That's crazy. I'm saying go to the Bears to get to play.
No, do not send him to Chicago.
No, send him to Chicago. I want to see that. I want to see it. I want to see Pittman with Fields. I want to see it. I think Pittman's an Ohio State guy too. I'm pretty sure. I want to see it. Good game for Pittman. The rest of the Colts, I don't want to see you on my TV. I'm so glad I don't got to see the Colts anymore. I'll see them for a little bit on Red Zone next week, but I am so glad I don't have to see the Colts in the playoffs.
I respect that. I think 2 guys that have really proven themselves this year a lot more than a lot of people gave him credit for. Saquon Barkley reproved himself, because there was so much doubt before the year. So I want to give him a little bit of credit, because I was down on him all year, had a phenomenal season. But the bigger guy I want to give credit to, the guy that everybody passed on, said this guy sucks, he's not going to be a starting quarterback next year. Daniel Jones is going to finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback on the season. He's been absolutely dominant on the ground. He's not putting up Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts level or Josh Allen level production, but it's not as far off as you would think, which is crazy to say. The Giants talked about before this game how they want to give both those players long-term extensions. They deserve it, and good for the Giants making the playoffs. As a sorry-ass Jets fan right now, good for my New York counterpart, which I hate more than 90% of the organizations in this league.
Yeah. Daniel Jones will be another fun one to evaluate in the offseason. He does finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback, possibly, or 11 or 12. The New Orleans Saints versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I wish I could find the graphic of where I straight up told everybody to draft Devontae Smith. And the funniest thing about me telling people to draft Devontae Smith is I did not draft Devontae Smith in any 5 of my fantasy leagues. But he was, and the take I almost kind of skidded back on. But listen, I'm right about that. Before this week updates, he's ranked 9th on ESPN. Another 20 fantasy points today. 9 receptions for 115 yards. He led the receivers. In yards and receptions and targets. He's probably going to finish the top 15 fantasy wide receiver. And Nick, we talked about this last week about, how T. Higgins and Chase probably going to be drafted in the top 20. How we also talked about that, Waddle and Tyreek probably again, top 20. I don't know where we put Devontae Smith next year. And I know we're looking very, very far ahead, and it's going to be a really lonely 8 months without fantasy football. It is. It's going to suck. But I don't know where we even rank this guy next year because his stats are really great. I mean, he doesn't have many stinkers. Week 8, week 9 stinkers. Week 4 stinker. Week 1 he had the goose egg. So you got 4 stinkers right there. But I mean, then you have like consistently over 15 points just about every other game. Those stats are identical to like a Jalen Waddle or a T. Higgins. So I'm not saying he should be drafted top 20, but I mean, like, I would take Devontae Smith over any Steelers wide receiver next year. I think I would take Devontae Smith over like a Michael Pittman, knowing that the Colts are a trash can. I think I would take Michael Pittman over, any Commanders. Like I want him over Terry McLaurin right now. I can't wait to represent the Commanders, if you can tell. I'm just making a point. Just like I don't know where we're going to rank him next year, but in terms of who are the best wide receiver 2s in the league, he's probably top 3 or 4 behind Waddle and T. Higgins. And his stats are, from a fantasy perspective, his stats are right there. And I think we got to put some respect on his name, at least from a fantasy perspective.
I agree with that. Entirely. I think the wide receiver 2 question is going to be evaluated a lot by us, more so because we have the conversation, I feel like, more than most analysts. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, this is another game where it's like I didn't see a lot from either of these two teams, and it's hard to gauge. Neither of them are going to have these quarterbacks next year as their starter.
They were also rarely on the red zone too, if you're watching the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, like the Eagles had a chance to win the game through a pick six, like shocking. Like it's the Eagles, like with Gardner Minshew running the helm against New Orleans, who is a loaded defense. I don't really have a big takeaway. I feel like you hit the major point. But there's one guy that you have a note about here that I think is going to be very interesting to analyze next year.
Yep.
Alvin Kamara, who is going to face a suspension at the start of next season, and
I'll be out 3 games.
Very disappointing. If he is out 3 games, I mean, I do not know where you draft him because he played poorly. I don't know if he has a contract extension. But if he doesn't, I know he's part of that 2017 rookie class. He's
going to be 28 in July.
So he will wind up in that running back dead zone, most likely. And I'm trying to think of what names are going to be there that are like comparable.
He is not an unrestricted free agent until 2026.
Okay, so he did re-sign with them then.
Yeah, he's a Saint, it looks like.
So if he is a Saint, and then we don't know the quarterback situation, let's say it's the same situation as this year, which it won't be.
I'm avoiding him.
I mean, I wouldn't touch him. He's going to be going around David Montgomery. They ran the ball super well. Miles Sanders is going to be in that range. I'll take Miles Sanders.
You know what's crazy? He's still the running back 14 as of now. It's probably going to dip a little bit, but he's still. I mean, it's just like it's inconsistent. And he has that one big game. He scored 42, but I mean, a lot of these are bad. Like,
I mean, would you take him over Zeke, knowing how many touchdowns Zeke got this year?
I need to know what the Cowboys situation looks like, but like, if you told me we're running back same rosters every team in the league, I think I'd take Zeke over him because Zeke's going to be in the red zone a lot more than Kamara is.
Yeah, I agree.
Zeke's going to get fed by Coach Jerry Jones. Kamara doesn't have a quarterback to toss him balls. Like, the thing with McCaffrey is he overcomes the injuries, and no matter what team he's on, he's still getting receptions. Austin Eckler, we were not. I certainly wasn't high on Austin Eckler, and he proved me wrong this year. And Eckler, I think, is the same age, and I know his offense is better. I mean, if Kamara was on the Chargers, I think he would play better. But I'm just saying, like, didn't look as good. So he's going to be. I think he's going to be. he's going to be tough to evaluate because he's definitely won you a lot of fantasy games. He's still talented. He still has name value, and the position is scarce. But then it's like, would you rather have Alvin Kamara, or would you rather have, Kenneth Walker? It's a name to throw out, or Travis Etienne. So
Damian Pierce is going to be in that range too.
I don't know. We'll see.
That's a tough one, at least for me.
I wouldn't want Damian Pierce at the moment. Doesn't catch enough balls, and the Texans' offense is.
They're going to draft a QB at the 101 and have a new coach and new.
You're not wrong. Texans. Ugh.
There's too much talent there. It's going to be interesting.
Carolina Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Speaking of talent, the Bucs are freaking talented. I've been saying it. We needed the Bucs talent game, and they got it. They're going to rest for next week. It's going to be a bye week, and then they're going to go and play the Cowboys. Nick, I wonder what your big takeaway from this one is.
So I saw two things online before. I saw one before the game and I saw one after the game. The one before the game talked about the Bucs as a team, and it said last week they were down 10 points to the Cardinals in primetime, and at no point in that game did you think they were going to lose. It's the same way. It was 21-10 in the fourth quarter, and the Buccaneers absolutely stormed back, scored 3 touchdowns, blew them out for the rest of the game. So that was the first thing. At no point did I feel the Buccaneers were out of it. More of a football take that'll have to do with the postseason. But the second part of it was my favorite tweet of the year for fantasy. It said, "Congratulations to Mike Evans and all of his owners for winning the consolation bracket, because he absolutely lost you your first or your second round of your playoffs." Good for Mike Evans. We had him on the all boom team. 10 for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Was phenomenal, looking at 50 points in all of my my second place leagues or consolation brackets. Thank you very much, Mike Evans, as I drafted you in 4 leagues and you finally decided to show up at some point this season. It was a good week to show up, but I think it's a little too late for me.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you did Mike Evans, you won your championship, and you forgive him for the bad weeks if he did get in your championship. So other notes I do want to add here. Chris Godwin, a very quiet 9 for 120. That's 21 fantasy points right there. I don't know what the Buccaneers running back situation is going to be next year, but like Fournette's been consistent. I think he may have hit under 10 today. I think Rachaad White may have been right under 10, and the Carolina running backs didn't play well. Brady had his best game of the season, and our darling DJ Moore had a solid game, a 6, 117, and a touchdown. I hate him. I don't even own him, and I hate it. I don't even own him. I think I owned him his rookie year, and I still can't stand him. It's just like
I love my favorite graphic of the year is going to be.
I bet he jumped in the top 24. He's ranked 27 right now. I don't think the stats count for today, right? I think ESPN will update tomorrow.
I don't know though, but his ADP was somewhere between 11 and 15 before the year.
You're right. He jumps back in the top 24 though, which is absurd.
He might finish at the edge of it, but yeah, I think he's another receiver that'll wind up being on the move.
I wish I trusted my gut and not ranked him in my top 24, and I did it because other people were, and I was like, I feel like I should throw him in here, but I'm avoiding him, and I shouldn't have. All right. The Cleveland Browns versus the Washington Commanders. I'll let you kind of start with this.
No. I'll let you go first. You've been excited for this one.
Ron Rivera, you're a fucking idiot, man. What is wrong? Time out here. Time out. Hold on here. Hold on. Washington Commanders. I'm Googling Washington Commanders schedule. Let's see what we did with Taylor Heineke. Let's see what we did. All right. Hold on. Google's taking a while. Okay. Google's really weird. Okay. So he lost to the 49ers 37-20, arguably the best team in the league. Okay. Lost to the Giants. Sunday Night Football. There was that, bullshit pass interference, not pass interference call 20 to 12, whatever. Tied the Giants on December 4th. Beat the Falcons by 6. Beat the Texans by 13. Beat the Philadelphia Eagles, who were the best team in football and undefeated, 32-21 on primetime. Lost to the Vikings by 3. It was probably 1 o'clock game, so good for Kirk Cousins. Beat the Colts. Beat the Packers, who were going to make the playoffs. Beat the Bears, who were getting hot at some point. Lost to the Titans by 4. Lost to the Cowboys by a good chunk, etc. Now, you are in the playoff hunt, right? First off, you need to win this game to stay in the playoff hunt, right? You need to beat the Cleveland Browns, who I don't know when last time did they win last week? I don't even know. I think they got eliminated last week. So let's look at the Cleveland Browns schedule. All right, Cleveland Browns. the Browns had lost to the Saints last week by 7. They beat the Ravens, who were depleted, and they lost the Bengals. They beat the Texans. So they're losing to good teams. The Browns are not a good football team. Let's reiterate that the Browns are not a good football team. So now you got to beat the Cleveland Browns. And we're putting Carson Wentz as the starter. Listen, I'm not there at practice. I can't tell you what's been seen at practice, but what I know is that Taylor Heineke had chemistry with these guys for, 12 weeks, right? I think Carson Wentz went out week 4 or 6. Well, let's say 10 weeks. I think it's roughly 10 weeks. He had chemistry with these receivers and this offense for 10 weeks. And now you throw Carson Wentz in there and expect him to just go out there and win you the game. Not only do you lose the game, then you go to the press conference, you're like, oh, I didn't know we could be eliminated today. And he clarifies and goes, well, I was only thinking about winning. Yeah, that's great. But if you're only thinking about winning, I saw a good tweet. Somebody goes, if you're only thinking about winning, why did you not go for it on 4th down 85% of the time? If you were dead set on winning the football game, it's win or go home. If that's what you're thinking, then why did you not even go for it? Like, Ron Rivera is an idiot. Like, I'm glad he beat cancer. Fuck cancer. I hope everybody on the planet beats cancer. That's great. I don't know why he got the second coaching opportunity. I don't know why he's a coach in the league, because he had the one. I don't know if
he's
he's
an
riding,
outdated defensive-minded coach. He does not.
but I feel like he's riding off a little bit of success with the Carolina Panthers. And yes, making the Super Bowl to me is not enough, because we've seen teams make the Super Bowl. He had one really good year where they won, I think, 12 games. They lost to the 49ers, made the Super Bowl 2 years later, and then they fell apart. Then he gets a job at Washington. I think he gets cancer, I believe. My timeline could be off, and then he comes back. I don't know if he's had a winning record with the Commanders. I don't think he's made the playoffs. I don't think he's made the playoffs. So what are you riding off of right now? Now you're riding off a head coach who is limiting his players. He didn't play, Antonio Gibson at certain times. I think he has a lot of talent that could be unleashed. He didn't make the right quarterback call. Didn't even know that they could be eliminated. So from a football standpoint, Ron Rivera cost the Commanders a playoff spot. He cost the Commanders today. And from a fantasy standpoint, he cost you guys the game, right? If you had Taylor Heineke in this game, I know it's a tougher matchup for the receivers. I bet you, I will bet you my money that Jahan Dotson has a good game. I will bet you my money Terry McLaurin has a good game. I'll bet you my money that the Commanders win the game. Carson Wentz is not a starter in this league anymore. He's a solid backup. There was no reason to bench Heineke. It's not like Heineke was playing bad. So it made zero. Like, the Vikings just got obliterated. Are they going to go and bench Kirk Cousins? I don't think so. It's the same thing to me. You don't go and bench a guy that's won you a bunch of games, and they lost the close ones to the Giants, division game. It happens. It was stupid to me. It's pure stupidity on Ryan's part. I have no dog in this, by the way. I didn't own any Commanders this year. I literally don't think I owned one. I think I had Antonio Gibson on one team and I traded for him. And I may have owned Dotson one or two places. I was not in a fantasy championship today. He didn't affect the one league where I was fighting for points. This is me just speaking as a football fan. I don't understand it. I just don't. I feel like a lot of people did not understand this decision. I would love to get a sit down with a couple of these players and get their legitimate thoughts on the decision, how it affected their team and their playoff chances. So, that's my take on Ron Rivera. I think he should be the first coach fired in the offseason behind Josh McDaniels.
I think that's an interesting take for sure, because it was probably one of the maybe 5 worst personnel decisions this year. I mean, maybe number 1. Like I'm trying to think of anything that was worse.
Every quarterback change with the Colts.
Yeah, that would be number 1. But they at least had a coaching change.
It just made no sense. It made zero sense that they just flipped quarterback to quarterback.
I think it's time for Ron Rivera to hang it up, and I think he'd be a very good analyst as well. Because he probably would.
I'm sure he's a nice guy. Again, happy he beat cancer. Sure, he's a nice guy. Yeah. He did some good things in the league. He did take that Panthers team to the Super Bowl. Him and Cam Newton had a really fun offense for a couple of years. He did some good things, but no, he needs either a change of scenery or he shouldn't be there. He's keeping the Commanders in purgatory. And I don't care about the Commanders. I don't love the Commanders, so I don't really care. It's just me speaking from a football fan perspective here.
Yeah, I think he's been horrendous so far in his time with Washington. Yep. My big takeaway from the game is more on Cleveland's side of the ball. I think they covered the Commanders perfectly. Deshaun Watson, he definitely played his best game as a Brown so far, but that was still not a good football game. He did only put together about like 16 minutes of the vintage Deshaun Watson football. And I still didn't think it was great. I mean, Washington has a good defense, so I'll give them credit for that. But like another team that's going to be interesting, like Amari Cooper, he had a phenomenal fantasy day, but like in terms of real football, he had 2 big touchdowns and 3 catches on the day. So, more weeks than not, that's typically not a guy you want to start in your fantasy lineup. That looks like someone off your waiver wire, like Mac Hollins earlier this year that put up the very good stat line in the good game. Another team that'll just be interesting to analyze, and I'm very much looking forward to our postseason and off-season content because I think there's going to be a lot of fun breakdown. We get to put a lot more theories together about the year, which tend to be wrong.
I agree. And Coop's going to end up being a top 15 wide receiver on the year, and I'm holding out for Deshaun Watson. What? You can't hear me? Or
he's going to finish in the top 15, and I can't see myself taking him over Devontae Smith, Teague, and Jalen Waddle.
No, I understand that. And a good discussion that we will have is, you may not like wide receiver 2s like I do, but would you rather have wide receiver 2A over wide receiver 1 on bad team B? And that's a discussion we'll have next year.
For sure.
But for Deshaun Watson, I want to hold my football take out on him until I see him next year, because again, I want to see him practice for a couple months with the team. I want to see him, not get thrown into the fire of week 10. Like from a mental standpoint, he's entering week 12 and the Browns are already kind of out of the playoffs. You don't know which players are checked in, checked out. Like it's a lot. It's a lot to throw a guy into. I'm not saying fair, unfair, whatever, but I don't want to say he's a bad football player. It isn't Deshaun Watson until I see it next year. Now, if he goes out there and shits the bed for like 4 weeks next year, I'm out on him. But I'm not in, but I'll draft him as a backup next year is what I'm saying, and see what happens. All right. The Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. The Jaguars, I am crowning, are America's team because they are a team that everybody had no hopes for, didn't really care about, didn't look like a lot of fun, and now they actually are a lot of fun. The defense has been much improved. Just from a fantasy standpoint, like I don't know the players honestly. Again, I don't do a lot of defensive stuff per se. I know they drafted a couple defensemen with higher picks in the draft, but over the last 4 weeks, the defense, fantasy perspective, 11, 11, 13, 16 defense is much improved. The offense is a lot of fun. Trevor's going to end up being a top 10 fantasy quarterback on the year. Travis Etienne is going to end up probably as a top 15 running back, I want to say. Right now with ESPN, he's ranked at 19, but he had 23 today, so he may end up being top 15. Christian Kirk had a career year. Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, had the year that the Giants fans wanted him to have. Awesome for the Jags. They're America's team. We should all be rooting for them next week. Nobody should want to see the Titans in the playoffs. They're boring. They're miserable. I want to give Mike Vrabel credit because I think he's a great head coach. That roster sucks. It sucks. Like, there's Derrick Henry and there is... That's the roster. It's a fart noise. Like, I don't want to disrespect these guys. They make a lot of money, and I sit in my basement doing podcasting. But it's like... I'm just being honest here. Like, listen, they're much more successful than I am. So again, I just want to say that. But like the front seven is actually pretty good. So they do have a couple guys on defense, but it's just, I know they dealt with injuries, but it's just like the roster's not good. I'm just being honest here. It's not good. So we don't want to see the Titans in the playoffs. I just don't. They will get washed by any of those other teams that are not named the Baltimore Ravens. Every other team, I think, washes them. I think if Jacksonville plays like the Chargers, I think that's a really fun game. If Jacksonville plays, trying to think of who else they could play.
I think
Bengals.
They're going to play Jacksonville in the first round. Will either play the Chargers or the Ravens.
You're right, yeah.
And
or the Bengals.
They make it.
I think they could play the Bengals.
Not the Bengals.
If the Bengals lose to the Ravens next week.
Yeah, so the Bengals would need to lose that, and then that would happen.
Yeah. So again, I think those are really fun matchups, and I would much rather see the Jaguars and the Ravens than the Titans and the Ravens. Another one here. Trevor was pulled early, and I think the receivers kind of were too, because Jermichael Hasty and Snoop Connor had touchdowns. And that's a rough beat for people with Evan Ingram or Christian Kirk. That's a rough beat, but it happens. It's fantasy.
Yeah, I like the new crowning of America's team. It disgusts me that that's America's team.
They're
But
Florida's team too. They're definitely Florida's team.
No, yeah. They're Florida's team for sure over Brady and Tua.
They are more fun
100%.
than the
I
Bucs
back
right
that.
now.
I think they're another team that'll be interesting to analyze. I just talked about year 3 breakout quarterbacks. Well, I don't think Christian Kirk's a star. I don't think Zay Jones is a star. Calvin Ridley was a star. And those other 2 receivers, they're not stars, but they're B+ receivers. At least they've shown this year that they have that ability. So
yeah,
when that wide receiver core fully comes together, I think it's absolutely going to be their division for the next 5 years. And we'll see how far that they can really go. For fantasy, all those receivers are going to be fun to analyze. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to go somewhere between 7 and 10 for quarterback next year. I think it's going to be a fun team. I think it really is.
Trevor's going to be in the zone that like Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson were this year. And
Yeah.
if you told me right now, if we were drafting a dynasty, if we were drafting, I don't want to say a dynasty league, I guess like hypothetically, we're drafting right now for next year. I would take Trevor Lawrence over like Dak Prescott. That's kind of where I'm.
100%. I think the one that comes to mind would be him or Kyler Murray.
I was just about to say that. We were right on that.
That's exactly where I think the line is, because Kyler's rushing, like stat sheet, right? Like that's all that matters for fantasy.
Yep. Kyler's also going to miss.
And then
like
another one that comes to
year.
mind. Well, I think Justin Fields would be above both of them, but I mean, if you showed me Trevor Lawrence outscored him, like was a higher quarterback at the end of next season, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he could be neck and neck with Burrow, and I'm a Burrow guy, but I think they're very comparable quarterbacks. Both big, they'll have a couple rushing touchdowns. They're going to sling the ball. They're going to give Burrow a slight edge, but I think they're comparable.
The game I am really looking, like I really hope happens, that I don't think is going to happen, is as I heard, I forget who it was. It was one of the Fox Sports shows. In the AFC has the Mount Rushmore of young quarterbacks. It's Mahomes, Josh Allen, Burrow, and then it's going to be Trevor Lawrence versus Herbert. Because if they play each other in the first round of the playoffs, one of them will walk away with a playoff win, and that will be the one that'll make the Mount Rushmore. Assuming Lamar doesn't,
Oh, it's going to be Trevor because Herbert doesn't win playoff games.
What?
Herbert doesn't win playoff games.
He hasn't had an opportunity.
Well, now he gets his opportunity.
Can I give? We got to talk about the Chargers. I'll talk. I got some stats for you about Herbert.
I love talking about Herbert. I love it. All right. The New York Jets against my Seattle Seahawks. Battle of the podcast here. I wish I could say that I'm super duper happy about the win, but now I got to watch Aaron Rodgers rip my heart out on Sunday Night Football next week when he just decimates the Lions, or maybe those Rams save me from getting my heart ripped out and they just obliterate my Seahawks on Sunday, which could definitely happen. I'm already mad at the Rams for costing me that game a couple of weeks ago because Baker's a loser and had to throw that pick six. That's going to be a lot of fun next week. But from a fantasy standpoint, would you like to talk first or would you like me to talk first?
You go first. I can't.
Sure. I will talk about the quarterback situation, and Nick is right about a lot of things. I'm right about a lot of things, and we're wrong about a lot. And Nick was pounding the desk about Mike White a couple weeks ago. I don't know if he's still hurt. Maybe. I don't know what the backstage politics are going on, whatever. But I was never a believer in Mike White. And you know what? I was for like a second. I did have him starting over Joe Burrow in the first round of my playoffs. I was very, very, very close to starting Mike White over Joe Burrow, and then obviously he got hurt. But I was never a believer in it. And I hate saying it's a Jets quarterback and stuff, but he hadn't shown me enough. He hadn't shown me he could win big football games. He hadn't shown me, that he could come up in clutch moments. And he told me he could stuff the stat sheet, which is good for fantasy. But to me, he was always a poor man's Kirk Cousins. And there's a reason I don't really draft Kirk Cousins, who's had a very good year. So I don't want to knock Kirk Cousins, but if he played him today, I don't know what the points he scored. I'm going on a tangent, but with that said, Mike White's not the answer for the Jets. I think the Jets have a spectacular defense. They got a couple really good running backs, including Breece Hall is going to be coming back. Garrett Wilson probably wins Rookie of the Year. Kenneth Walker's probably there with him, but I think Garrett Wilson still edges him out. It's going to be
between the two of them.
I think
ETN is technically up for it still, because he missed his entire rookie year.
I call him a rookie, but technically, I don't know. I say he's a rookie. My point being, though, the Jets have a lot of really good pieces. For my friend Nick, for my brother Joe, for other Jet fan friends out there, my dad, I do hope they get a quarterback because they have a really good roster around them. But yeah, Mike White's not the answer, and they'll have a top 12 draft pick or something. They'll have their, they might have their pick a quarterback, and we'll see what happens with that. So there you go.
So the rumor for the Jets is that they're going to push for Lamar. I know my Jets. I'm a Knicks fan. Full disclosure, I'm a diehard Knicks fan. I know I go every year through the cycle of we suck. We're gonna have a good draft pick. We're gonna get the top draft pick. We're gonna get the top free agent. We landed none of them. We suck, and it's the everlasting cycle. So here's what I do want to say about the Jets, as this is my season wrap up. If you told me, I'm very pissed off right now about how the season ended. But if I go back to week 1, I said the Jets will win somewhere between 7 and 9 games this season. They will outperform the expectation because the roster is very good. And if some of these rookies hit, it's going to be phenomenal. The Jets rookies, they should win offensive and defensive rookie of the year. Their top 2 picks in the draft. Their young edge rusher looked good. Breece Hall looked phenomenal, and the Jets team was 5-2 up until his injury, or 5-3, whatever it was. The team looks very good, and it is, in my opinion, a poor man's Tampa Bay minus Tom Brady at quarterback. And when I say that, I mean there's a lot of talent on there. It is young talent. It is expendable, and I think it is a very attractive situation to a veteran quarterback. I don't think Lamar will be our guy. I think it's going to be Garoppolo or Carr next year, which I'd be happier about as long as I don't hear any more Lamar rumors to the Jets, because that'll be annoying. But anyway, this is a fantasy show, so I will not go on too much more of a tangent for my Jets. I will just say Sauce is him, and Sauce, I did say on the podcast, will hold DK Metcalf to less than 5 targets. And me and Nick both agreed he should be benched. Well, he had 1 catch on 3 targets. So
yeah, I do want to get my honest evaluation of Sauce today. I thought he was very good. I thought he played very good against just about every position. There's one point where they targeted Sauce back to back on different positions, and I don't know why they did that. He's excellent. Now, I will say, he does get away with a lot of hand grabbing, and it does kind of surprise me. Every time I see him play, he gets away with a lot of hand grab, and not every play, but on certain plays, he does get a bit handsy. It does surprise me because not because of him, because it's an offensive league, and most of the time they give the call to the offensive player. Does surprise me a little bit. DK also dropped 1 or 2 balls that Gino really put really nice throws on, and that's credit to Gino more so than anything else. It wouldn't have changed DK stat line too much. I still, so those stats are not going to affect my opinion of Sauce. That's more me saying, DK, you got to catch the freaking ball, dude, when Gino's putting it in the pocket against an excellent corner. If you're going to beat an excellent corner and he's putting it in your breadbasket, you got to catch it. There's one, I don't know if you remember, down the sideline on the right side, and really good ball, and you dropped it. And I thought at first the safety came over and hit him, but if you watch the replay, it was here and it fell. So again, honest opinion of Sauce, I think he's very good, gets away with some hand fighting, but that's the league that we play in. Sometimes they let them play. Should win Defensive Player of the Year, and should be a cornerstone of that franchise. Also, jump in.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. My last note about this game is that Kenneth Walker had another big game, 133 yards. I said he had a great rookie year. He is lacking PPR ability, though, and that's something we'll talk about next year. Reminds me a lot of Josh Jacobs, where he kind of needs 100 yards and a touchdown to have a successful day as a running back. And there's not many running backs who are going to be PPR running backs at this point. And a year or two ago, there were, and it seems like this year almost regressed, in my opinion, where a year or two we had CMC, Kamara, Eckler, a couple others out there. And this year, I feel like there weren't as many PPR backs, and it was kind of a lot of these. You have to get 100 yards and a touchdown to kind of have a really good fantasy day. It's also why I'm kind of avoiding running backs. So, yeah.
Did
you want to say anything? I didn't want to.
Yeah, one last take. We talked a lot this episode about ADP and where people are going to be drafted. I think there's a few that always pop in mind when I think about both these teams. I think the receivers for the Hawks are going to go right back to where they were 2 years ago, both being in the top 60 draft picks. Geno Smith will be interesting because he will be drafted in leagues as a starter based off his production this year.
If they don't pick a quarterback.
The big one for me is Garrett Wilson. I think it all depends on who the quarterback is there, because Garrett Wilson, I think, is going to finish in the top 24, just outside of it for the wide receiver position. So if he does do that and then he gets a star-studded receiver, you target or star quarterback or veteran quarterback. Like I always said, you target those year 2 wide receiver breakouts. There you go. Like it's the perfect situation. So if we do get a Jimmy Garoppolo or preferably the Derek Carr for fantasy, Garrett Wilson, I will draft you above T. Higgins, and I'll leave the note on that.
All right. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is fine enough for Garrett Wilson, but I personally don't want Jimmy Garoppolo on my football team. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. I did say I would take him over Geno before the season. Maybe that was a bad take. All right. San Francisco 49ers versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Man, I don't know who predicted this game, but yeah, this was a football game. All right. Do you want to talk first?
Yeah. I mean, what the hell was that? I mean, no one expected this, and I have credit to two people that have gotten.
But before you give credit, I want to cut you off real quick. We need a rule next year. There are a list of players me and you just cannot talk about. Devontae Adams is at the top of Nick Cap's list right there, and probably
it's
like
not,
5
It's not
Bengals.
Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase isn't number 1 on
the
the list.
No. He's not there anymore. It's Devontae Adams.
How about Burrow? Burrow belongs on that list.
I feel like you apologize to Burrow. I feel like you've already apologized to the Bengals and they can't be there. And I think
apologized.
I think you've had more right Bengals takes than wrong over the last month.
Well, that's because I decided to say that they're going to succeed. They have.
And the thing is, I agreed with you with Adams this morning when we did our show.
You did. I have the clip. I can have the clip.
He went 7, 153 and 2 touchdowns. I hope you guys didn't bench him.
Yeah, no, I hope you didn't listen to us when we said that's the decision that makes or breaks fantasy championships. Probably broke your fantasy championship. Anyway, so I want to give 2 kudos here. 2 guys that never get kudos. Josh McDaniels did a phenomenal job game planning for San Francisco. This game should have never been close. They were outmatched at almost every position group, if not every position group on the football field. And they showed up. They sent it to overtime. And they had a chance to really win this game, and they didn't pull it out. And the second credit goes to Jarrett Stidham, because Jarrett Stidham, I don't know if you know this, he put up a 70% completions, 365 yards. He had 2 turnovers, which I think is fine. New system, well, not really a new system because he came from McDaniel's system originally, but first time at starting with this team, really getting reps and pretty much smoked the best defense in football. Man, I did not see this coming. I did not see Jarrett Stidham having any validity, and he's going to finish the week as a top 7 quarterback in fantasy. If you are playing in week 18, I think that they play the Chiefs. They play the Chiefs or the Chargers next week. He is viable.
Yep. All right.
He's a viable starter.
Some notes here. I mean, Darren Waller, 372-1. I mean, I think most of you played him unless you had a better option, which probably wasn't many. Jacobs saved his day with a touchdown at the end there. Still had 69 yards and 4 receptions. I think he had close to 20 fantasy points. Didn't get 20 carries, so screw you, Josh McDaniels. Still not. That's why you lost the game. Yep, I stick by that. I stick by that statement. Brandon Ayuk, 9-101 and 1. He had a really good game last week as well without Deebo Samuel. And lastly, George Kittle. Another double-digit fantasy day. He kind of saved his day with a touchdown as well to get 15 fantasy points or 12 or something. But, still, if you drafted Kittle and he frustrated you up until this playoffs and he made your playoffs, he probably helped you win a championship. And, that's why you draft people. I will be avoiding Kittle next year personally. But, yeah. The Minnesota Vikings versus the Green Bay Packers. The Vikings didn't help my Seahawks, and that's really miserable. And I said on the show on Sunday morning, this was basically a nationally televised game for Kirk Cousins, and I wanted to see a map of exactly what areas were getting this game. Nick, I'm going to show you the map. I'm going to show the viewers that are watching. The red is the people that got Minnesota and Green Bay and the 4 o'clock slate. So if you're looking at this map, like I am, if you're not, if you're listening on audio, every single state in the United States of America, not including Hawaii and Alaska, because I don't see them here. I don't know if they have televisions in Alaska. They probably do. Had the Green Bay Packers and Minnesota Vikings game, except for Southern California, a tiny bit of Northern California, Lower
It would literally be San
Oregon.
Francisco, LA, and probably New York.
Not even New York. Nope, the
Not
Jets are
even
on
New York.
Fox. The Jets are on Fox.
That's right. Yeah.
So basically, this was a primetime Kirk Cousins game. That's why we said you do not start Kirk Cousins. Now, I don't even know what Kirk Cousins' number was in fantasy. I just know that they got absolutely washed and embarrassed. Kirk Cousins scored 7 fantasy points. Good job, Kirk. Primetime Kirk Cousins. He's the worst. So, I mean, if you want to take a take here, you can. I mean, the other big ones that Justin Jefferson probably lost the fantasy football championships. And listen, if you could take a time machine and like, I still don't think you don't play Justin Jefferson with how good he's been, but he probably lost you a fantasy football championship with his only game of the season he had 3 games under 10 points. This was one of them. The other ones were against Dallas and Detroit. So yeah, that sucks.
So in 10 of his 16 games, he had over 100 yards this year. I do not want to hear any Justin Jefferson slander for Kirk Cousins' poor performance.
No, I won't slander him either.
Yes, he did get he had his worst game of his professional football career outside of maybe the first 2 weeks of his professional football career. But Justin Jefferson is still my 101 next year. I'm not budging off of that take.
Yep.
Unless if I find out that the Vikings have 7 to 8 primetime games.
Oh man, that's the one.
I don't care.
Yep. There you go. I agree with that. And the Packers, I hate them. I'm so miserable. They're going to be in the playoffs, and
I can't believe they're going to make the playoffs, and then they're going to get to face, hopefully not Brock Purdy in the first round.
No, I want them to face Brock Purdy because they won't beat San Francisco. I'm not a betting man. I will bet money on San Francisco. They will not.
The other potential option is the Minnesota Vikings, and that means Kirk Cousins will be in prime time going up against Aaron Rodgers again, and that means that Aaron Rodgers will make it to the second round of the playoffs. And me and Nick, we try to stay as neutral as possible. I try not to go too overboard with my Bengals takes. I know Nick's a Jets hater, as I joke.
No, I'm not.
He's not a Jets hater.
I do want to say our unbiased source. I will say this: our unbiased or our anonymous source that does fact check and stuff like that got me and Nick socks of teams that we don't like. Nick got some Bengals socks, and he says I hate the Jets, but he got me 49ers socks. So I guess he does know I do not hate the Jets. So I do hate the 49ers. All right, Los Angeles Rams versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Which take do you want to take here? If it's one of these two or a different one?
Well, you wanted to slander Justin Herbert, so I'm gonna have to give you some Justin Herbert numbers. Justin Herbert in his career. So do you remember the stat earlier this year where we said where the Denver Broncos would be 9-1 if they held teams under 19 fantasy points?
Yep.
Do you want to know what Justin Herbert's career record would be if the defense held teams under 27 points?
Sure.
18-4.
Oh, yeah,
The league average is 22 points per game. So to allow 27 literally means 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals or 4 touchdowns. If you hold the team to less than 4 touchdowns, Justin Herbert wins 75 to 80% of his football games. That's how good of a quarterback he is. That's how dominant of a quarterback he is. He is an absolute unit of a quarterback. I hate the slander towards him. And he proved everybody wrong this season. And I hope he wins 2 playoff games and knocks Joe Burrow's ass out of the playoffs.
That'd be a lot of fun to talk about. I would love to see it too.
I will have to do some grand gesture for it because.
Oh no, you will. And here's the funny thing. Justin Herbert seems like a nice guy. You know, I do enjoy watching his games. I don't actually dislike him. I just kind of think that there's other players that maybe I feel like every player gets slandered by the media in some way or form. I saw people slandering Burrow last year. I've seen it with every single player. And I guess just like. I've just never seen this guy win a big game, and I'm waiting for it to happen almost. If you picked up Cam Akers off of waivers, you may have won your fantasy championship just off of having 13 plus fantasy points in your flex spot for the past 3 weeks. I think I saw that the Rams probably keep Cam Akers next year and draft a running back. I feel like it's going to end up being a nightmare backfield, but at the same time, I mean, over the last 3 weeks here, he had over 100 yards twice. The other game, he had 65 yards, a couple receptions in each game. When he's over 17 carries, he's averaging, over 100 yards. So going to be a lot of fun to see how McVay evaluates Cam Akers. The other thing, Austin Eckler is a player that every fantasy player should enjoy because he actually loves fantasy football. I don't know if you know this, Nick. He plays fantasy football. He takes pride in fantasy football. He went on his Instagram last night and he said, "Hey guys, I know I've been on the injury report. I'm good to go." I think he guaranteed a touchdown. He had a fantasy championship belt on his shoulder. And he said, "I'm going to help you guys out tomorrow." He goes out there. I haven't looked at his points yet. 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that 70-yard run. If you're in a bonus league like I am, big points. Then 4 receptions for 39 yards. Austin Eckler, I think, is going to finish the season as the running back 1.
It'll be him or McCaffrey. I don't know. I think it is.
No, it's going to be him. I bet he outscored McCaffrey today. He had 32 fantasy points. So hats off to him for coming through big for his owners. And I wish I was higher on him going into the season. Didn't take every negative and fade him. But that's it's a sword that I kind of died on. I'm right about some things. I'm wrong about some things. So yeah, there you go. Moving on to Monday Night Football. There's going to be a really, I hope it's going to be a good Monday Night Football game, but it's probably the best talent of a Monday Night Football game that we've had in a while, I think. And playoff implications align for, the Bengals still need to win the NFC North. And I think both of these teams can technically still get the 1 seed, I think.
Yes. Well, they're eligible.
So I believe
both of them have beaten Kansas City this year. So if Kansas City, if Buffalo wins, I think Buffalo locks up the 1 seed.
No, they don't because Kansas City
won. Tiebreaker. If Kansas City loses next week, either of them can get it, or either of them are able to.
Well, if Buffalo wins tonight, they'll be 13-3. Kansas City will be 13-3. That's it. If Buffalo wins,
Buffalo
so next week, right? So Buffalo would have to win next week to secure the 1 seed. Cincinnati, though, Cincinnati's going to need some help. Actually, Cincinnati's going to need to win tonight. Then they'll be 12-4. Buffalo will be 12-4. Kansas City 13-3. Cincinnati to get the 1 seed would need to win 2 games. So tonight and next week. Then Kansas City with a lose next week as well. So Cincinnati probably doesn't get the 1 seed, but they can spoil Buffalo's chances at least.
Cincinnati would need to win, and they need Kansas City to lose.
The Ravens lost today, right?
No, they're playing right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why. So, So if the Ravens win, then then the Cincinnati game doesn't matter as much because they're going to play Baltimore next week for the division anyway. But if Baltimore loses, they'll be 10-6. If Cincinnati wins, they lock up the NFC North at least. So it's going to be a big game no matter what. Anyway, let's talk about some fantasy stats here. Josh Allen, 22.1 over under.
I am going to go with over.
I think I'm going to say over for all these. Yeah, over. Joe Burrow, 20.4.
Should I do it? I'm going to do it. I'm going to say the under for Joe Burrow.
Okay. I'm going to say the over. He's at over 20 in 3 out of the last 4. And they're playing at home in Cincinnati. I don't want to take unders right now. Devin Singletary, 9.7. Seems like a low number, which I feel like he could hit easily.
Bengals are pretty good against running backs, but I think Singletary is good for a touchdown and what should be a high-scoring game. So I'm going to say the over.
Joe Mixon at 16.
I'm going to go with over. I think Mixon's going to have an absolute dominating game.
This is where I'm actually going to say the under here. I think Buffalo's run defense is better than other run defenses he's faced. I know he's kind of splitting time with Samaje Perine a tiny bit. I'm going to say the under here. So that's a high line that requires a touchdown. Stephon Diggs, 16.9. I think he's had back-to-back stinkers, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I think he's going to have his get right here. He had a little bit. He had 1 extra day. I think he needs to get right, and I think this is the week to do it.
I think so, too. He hasn't had close to 100 yards since week 13. Hasn't had a touchdown since week 13. I think he needs this. Before the playoffs, they're going to need a get-right game for Stephon Diggs. I think this is it. So I'll give him the over. Gabriel Davis, a player Nick loves, 11.5.
I will go with the over here. I think, like I said, I think it'll be a high-scoring game. So if it is, the way Gabe Davis plays, it's literally his one massive catch for a touchdown. He can hit this line with 2 catches, 3 catches.
He's had more unders of this number than overs. I will say under. Jamar Chase, 20.4.
I'll go with over here. I'm pretty sure he's been the most consistent receiver in fantasy football this year. I don't think he has a game under 10, or maybe he has 1 game under 10.
We also have a league member that probably needs like 30, 40 points, something like that from Chase. He needs a lot of points from a lot of these guys, so we'll see what that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch tomorrow night. There might be another Monday Night Miracle for the points in our league. I got one last year. There might be another one, so I will say over on Chase. T. Higgins, 14.3.
Again, another guy I think I'll take the over on. I think Higgins is the most underrated receiver in football. I didn't think that before the year. I think that this year.
I think it's just a guy that you can safely say over, and if I'm wrong about it, I'm not gonna like say, if you say to me, "Oh, you were wrong," I'm like, well, what'd you want me to say? He's too talented. Dawson,
just real quick on T. Higgins. I don't want to go too long on it, but I truly do think T. Higgins is one of the 10 best receivers in football, and he doesn't get the credit for it because he is the wide receiver 2 on his team. His rookie year, he had Joe Burrow get hurt early on in the season, so you never got to see him fully. You've only gotten to see him behind Jamar Chase. I think if he steps away, it's going to be exactly like what happened with Stephon Diggs, where he left Adam Thielen because he was in Adam Thielen's shadow, and he boomed and proved that he's a top 5, top 10 receiver in football.
Sure.
I think Higgins absolutely could do that if they don't want to pay him.
Yeah, that's possible. How about Dawson Knox at 10?
I'm going to go
projection in 3 straight weeks.
I'm still going under.
I'll go under as well, because in those 3 straight weeks he had touchdowns. And if we're calling this a Stephon Diggs get-right game, then it won't be a Dawson Knox game. Hayden Hurst will be coming off his injury. I think it's a calf injury, I want to say. He has 7.9 is his projection. What do you say?
For lines like this, I like taking the over because it is an 8-yard catch for a touchdown, or 9-yard catch for a touchdown that gets him there. But I do think Hurst has had some pretty solid games this year. I feel like this is pretty much where his line is at. I don't want to play him, but I'd rather play him than Knox.
Yep. I'll say the under only because the Bills have surrendered the second least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. All right. That is our show for wrapping up week 17 fantasy championship week. I think we gave you a lot of good information, long show, but a lot of fun. So thank you guys for listening to that. If you want to keep supporting the show, please do. All audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching the show on YouTube, drop a like on this video, hit the subscription button. Please do that. YouTube Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Keep connecting with us. Social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and then Facebook and YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys for tapping in with us. We'll have another show this week. Is there a Thursday night game this week? I don't think there is.
I don't think so.
We're done.
I think we'll just have a massive boom bust episode.
Yeah, I think we're done with Thursday night football, unfortunately.
Yes.
So we'll have a show. Our show's going to drop on Friday this week. That'll be our last show heading into the last fantasy championship, and then we'll have the live show, of course, on Sunday. So thank you guys for listening. Enjoy Monday Night Football tonight, and best of luck tonight if you got to win your championship. I hope you win it, and enjoy the games. Hopefully you win that championship.